our heritage, I guess, is what I'm looking for on you. And I would like to have you start even I thought it was very interesting, a little bit about how Grandpa Anderson got saved and what made him decide to come to America.
And family lived in Stavanger, Norway. And at that time, most of the men had to go to sea in order to earn a living. And since my father was a carpenter, he got a job on a ship. And so he traveled from one place to the other. In fact, he had crossed the Atlantic 23 times before he took his family across, finally. But on this occasion, his ship stopped at Bristol, England, I suppose for overnight or for maybe 2 or 3 days. I don't know how long. But as he walked around the streets, he saw a little group of people on a street corner. So, out of curiosity, he went over to see what was going on. And here was a group of Salvation Army people, and a lady, Salvation Army lassie, was preaching and drawing people to hear the message. When the message was over with, she gave the invitation. Who would like to give their heart to the Lord Jesus? She must have made it very clear and very plain. And my father knelt right there at the street corner and gave his heart to the Lord that night.
That
And
sounds great.
that was the beginning for him. And I don't know how long it was after that. I wasn't on the scene yet. I hadn't come into this world. And there was a big push to get missionaries to go to the island of Madagascar. Oh, his heart was stirred. He wanted to go as a missionary to the island of Madagascar and take this wonderful, wonderful message to them. So they asked him how many children he had. Well, I don't know how many he had, but I wasn't on the scene yet, and I'm the 10th child. And when they found out he had so many children, they said, "We'd love to send you, but we can't. Your family is too big. It would cost us too much." And so he didn't get to go. But from that day on, I believe, he kept praying that at least one of his children would become a missionary. And I was that one.
It had to be the last one.
Yes, yes,
So then when you got to America,
yes. He had, I believe that he had a brother that was working in South Dakota. And the letters that came told about better wages and better working conditions and everything. And surely this must have been of the Lord that spoke to his heart that he wanted to go then to the United States and see what he could do there, do better. And he did have some brother. He had one brother, I know, maybe he had more. And so that's how it happened that they came to the United States. Well, first of all, they were in Parker, South Dakota then when I was born. That was about 2 months after they arrived in the United States. And my mother had relatives there, and there were relatives in Webster, South Dakota. And so they were there, and my father had carpenter work immediately so he could take care of the family. And then he heard about Montana, that you could go out to Montana and take up a homestead, and there everything would be wonderful. So he decided that's what he was going to do. He's going to take this big family to Montana.
mm-hmm.
And so the time came, I should say before they went, another child was born. Her name was Mary. And she lived to be 18 months old. She died from pneumonia. And it was a strange thing. My mother, in a dream, had seen a wagon with drawn by one horse. It was a white wagon, drove up to a certain place, and he tied up the horse, and he pulled out a big, it was a coffin, a white coffin. She saw this. And then she knew that something was wrong. It wasn't long till little Mary was dead, and she was buried just that way.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. So then you boarded a train at Webster.
Let me see. Now that's a little bit dim with me. Where we started out from, we had to start from somewhere, but we had to change trains. I do know that.
Oh, okay.
We had to change trains along the way, and I can still. It was just a thrill to me to ride on a train at night. And there we were, all in this long train. And finally, we got to Lavina, Montana, because we had not yet gone to Broadview. There was no railroad to Broadview yet. And so we got out at Broadview, and they pitched a tent, and that's where our big family lived in, until the snow fell. There we were. And there were some very kind Christian people by the name of Furch. They lived out of town several miles. They were fine Christian people. And here was this big family that was living in a tent, and the snow was falling. And so they said, if you want to, you can come to us, and we'll let you have our whole upstairs. And we were a big family. And surely the Lord will give them a good recompense for that kindness on their part. And that's where we lived until the house was finished that they were building down on the homestead, down on the flat.
When you left Lavina, you traveled by wagon then.
Yes, we were all in
You
the
didn't
wagon.
walk.
Oh no, that was
Yeah.
quite a number of miles
Yeah.
from there.
It's 10 or 12 miles.
Something like that.
Yeah.
No, there was room for all of us. I can still see how we were
Okay.
in this wagon, long wagon. Yes.
All right. Well, I hadn't. Dad had told me about going to Broadview, but I didn't remember whether they. I've heard some people walked a long ways, carrying all their possessions, and I just wondered if you'd done that.
Well, I don't know. I think they must have gotten everything in. I have never heard them say, but it could be there was room for all of us, at least, in this big wagon.
You didn't have any livestock with you either, did you?
No, we had nothing. No furniture, no nothing.
Oh,
no nothing.
Well, you didn't come from another farm and just started a farm out in Montana. Then Grandpa he started a house on a homestead you said southeast of Broadview.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then you had a flat full of water out there because of the.
Yes, my brothers. What were they doing? Digging a well or something?
I think that from what Dad said, they were digging a well.
They were digging a well, yes. And it had snowed. And those of you who have lived out in those areas know that the Chinook winds are very sweet, warm, wonderful winds that come. And if there isn't too much snow, too high, it will be gone in just a very short time, probably minutes, maybe just 15, 20 minutes it will go. And so my brothers were down, two of them were down digging this well. And here blows in this beautiful Chinook wind. And my father called to the boys and said, you better get up out of there right away, because this will all be water, and there's no place where it can run, because it's flat ground all along. There's no way where the water can run except down in that hole that you're digging. And so they got out of there. And it's very true. It wasn't long before, as you looked around, it was all the water. It had all melted right away. Going back to the homestead where we lived, about 3 miles southwest of what became Broadview.
Southeast.
Southeast.
Yeah.
southeast.
Dad was southwest.
Yes.
He had Dad's homestead southwest.
Those the early years, perhaps the very first year, my mother was, they had no dryers, no washers, no dryers. And so they'd wash her beautiful spreads that she'd brought from Norway and hang them out on the line, and right away they would freeze. And so they didn't have any place in the house either. They never thought about anything that might get at them. But so they left them up on the line during the night, and then the range cattle came, and they began chewing on those beautiful bedspreads because they found water coming out of the ice that was in them. And so some of her beautiful bedspreads were chewed up, and I can remember how badly she felt about many things like that. Mm-hmm. And another thing, she wanted to make some clothes, some dresses for the girls, and she wanted to buy red, but she was afraid that these range cattle might run after them. Yeah. And so what did she do? She took the red cloth out and spread it out in front of these cattle to see how it would affect them. And of course, it didn't do anything to them, so then she made it up with the help of Selma and the other girls there. But it wasn't an easy life. And the song, the state song for the schools it ended like this: Montana, I love you. And my mother said, sing Montana, I hate you. Mm-hmm. She couldn't forget Norway, and she didn't know the English language. She didn't have the friends that she once had. I remember that there was a family that came by the name of Sandocker, and they were about 10 miles away from where we were. And they would hitch up the horses to the wagon, and we'd all go to Sandocker's for over Sunday and have a meeting there. And my mother just rejoiced in that she had a good friend in the Sandockers. Well, that's what some of the early ones had to suffer during those days, yes.
Yeah, that's mm-hmm. right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then Grandpa built a lot of houses around Broadview.
Yes, he and Andrew and Ingold. The two boys learned carpentry work from my father. And they loved to work with him. They worked together just like one. The three of them just worked together like one. And they built some very nice big houses. I remember the Trogdon's house right across from the church that they built later. And that building, that house was taken down, pulled down. It was moved down to Billings.
That's right. It became a hospital.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so there were others too. Now I don't recall. There several beautiful houses were moved down there, but I can't recall whose they were. I can see them in my mind's eye, but I can't recall the names of the people who lived there. I know one of them was a banker. Mm. He had a very lovely house that was built by.
There was a fellow by the name of Wagner, I think, that had a house up there that was moved to Billings. And I can't think of the fellow's name he was a barber in Billings that brought his house down. He just wasn't going to leave his house at Broadview. Mm-hmm. Okay. You might tell about, Uncle Andrew died up there, and then Aunt Serena got married to Bob Kilgore. You might tell about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you will remember that there was I would say, a worldwide epidemic of the influenza. It was at that time, of course, Andrew by that time, he had married Gladys Isley. Gladys's father, Mr. Isley, was a minister, had come out from Nebraska. And Gladys was a very lovely, wonderful girl, a nurse. And so they were married. And I think it was about a year after this that the influenza broke out. Of course, Andrew had a very weak heart, and he always had to be sort of careful about that. And that combined with the influenza really took his life. It took his life. It was very hard to see him go. And he was buried out in the cemetery. In fact, going to the old homestead, we had to pass the cemetery where he was buried. And by that time, my mother had gone too, and she was buried out there. And Shreen and Bob had been married, and their first child was dead at birth, and so Philip Stewart is buried out there too. And so that cemetery holds many of our loved ones, but on the day of the resurrection, we will see them. My father decided that he better bring the family to the town that was growing up now. They were not to live on the homestead anymore. If they wanted to prove up on it, they could live there for 6 weeks a year, and that would equal as though they had lived there the whole year, the family. And so he built a house, and the boys with him. A very nice house out at the very end of the town. And my father was so anxious to have an apple orchard. And so on a slope, I can still see those trees, apple trees that he put in such beautiful straight lines. Whichever way you looked at it was a straight line, but never an apple on the trees. That was a real disappointment, but he had the joy of trying at least.
You didn't get any apples, huh?
Got no apples.
Oh, is that right?
I can't remember that there were any apples. If there were, they were just about a half a dozen or so.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I was talking to Harold Beeman, and he said that there was apples, but then he might have been mistaken.
Well, it could be that they did have some apples, and I don't remember it.
Well,
because I wasn't so very old myself at that time. But I remember how he would carry water to water them, because around that area it was very arid, and he would take buckets full of water and water the apple trees. I remember seeing them in blossom. I do remember that.
Right?
Yes, I remember seeing them in blossom.
Maybe they didn't have any honeybees up there to help pollinate or
Probably not. I don't recall it either.
Okay, so then how about what did your sisters do?
Well, Srina, of course, had been in Billings. She went to Billings sometime before and had gone to school where she learned shorthand and typewriting and got a good job with the district superintendent of schools, which was a lady. And Srina fit in there very well, very well. And before she got that job, however, she worked at Yagan's store and saved her money and paid her way through so that she could learn typewriting and shorthand. And then Selma and Annie, the next two girls, they studied then to be teachers, and that's what they became. Yeah.
Yeah, Selma taught in a school on Rimrock Road for a while that was known as it was on the Polytechnic.
Yes, on the Polytechnic grounds. There was a school, I think it was the first 6th grade, if I'm not mistaken. And she'd catch a bus and go out there in the morning and come back at night. Yes, that's where she worked. But she had other schools before she got that one.
Was that right? About what year would that have been? Have you got any idea?
I'd have to figure that out. I think probably I was down in Billings going to high school myself.
Okay. So you went to high school in Billings too?
Yes. I didn't start I had 2 years of high school, down in Broadview. And the teacher that I had was good, but when it came to algebra and geometry, he would let you take your book to the board and write everything on the board, the proof and everything, and then he would, now you can go up and give this. And so what we do would just be to read it. And when I went to Billings, this big high school that they had nearly 1,000 students, and in Broadview there had been 13 in this high school. And I recall so well when the teacher told me to go and put a theorem on the board, and but not put the proof down. And I realized this was something different. This wasn't the way that I had been taught, you see. And I had no foundation at all. And then when she told me I should get up and give the explanation, I had no book to follow or nothing. It was just the figure was on there. I couldn't do it. And so she said, well, Miss Anderson, that was my maiden name, she said, maybe in a few weeks you will be able to do this. So I felt so chagrined that I went to her and I said, I would like to get out of this subject and take something else. I just don't understand it. And she said to me, you know, Miss Anderson, if you do that, that's very bad for your character. You start something and you don't finish it. Now what you do, you come to me every spare period that you have, and I will teach you. And I did. And she made it so clear. For instance, she would take a piece of paper and a pencil, and she'd say, now we're going to prove that the point of this pencil touches this piece of paper in one point and only one point. And she made it so clear that I understood it. And it turned out that I was on the honor roll. In those days, E was the highest that you could get. Here it's A, but then it was E, excellent. And a couple of years later, when I was very sick in the hospital with bleeding ulcers, I said to the doctor, it was time then to give the spring exams. And I said, Doctor, couldn't I write out my exams right here on the bed? Well, I'll just go up there to the high school and find out about things. And so he went and he talked to the principal and he pulled out the records and he said, she's an E student. She doesn't have to take any exams. Mm-hmm. And so I was free from that. And I've always been thankful to Miss Wolgamott, a large, heavy-set woman who taught me many things. And above all, when you start something, finish it.
Yeah, that's something in itself, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it has followed me because sometimes when I make something and it doesn't work out, I'm not satisfied until I make it again and do it right. But I had my beginning with Miss Wolgamott. Well, the twins decided that they wanted to become nurses. We had 2 teachers, and now they wanted to become nurses. So on Division Street was a big hospital. I can still see this red brick building there. And they took the girls in, and they were taught. And that they were twins, and they were identical twins. And the doctors had a hard time recognizing. They thought that it was the same one. And I remember on one occasion, he said, good morning, Miss Anderson. And she said, good morning, Dr. Thurl. He went upstairs and he thought he saw her again. And he said, good morning, Miss Anderson. Good morning, Dr. Thurl. He came downstairs and he saw her again. And he said, am I following you or are you following me? Oh, that was my twin sister you saw upstairs. So they had quite a time. And then my sister Helen, she went in too and studied to be a nurse.
So then, all right. I tell about that.
Well, Bob had been wonderfully saved. He was a Christian Scientist. His mother, I think, was one, and Though Bob had attended the Methodist Church in Billings, yet at heart, he was really the other. And my father was trying to win him to the Lord. And he would talk to Bob and tell him he needed to be saved, and he'd work on him until Bob was just ready to cry, because my father was kind of hard on him. And my father was that way. He wanted them to know that they were sinners and they needed Jesus Christ as their Savior. Then an evangelist came to Billings, and Bob went to hear him, and he liked what he heard. And on this occasion, one of these days, my father was going to go to Broadview. We were all living in Billings at that time. And when he got down to the station, he saw the train pulling out. And he thought, my goodness, how is this? And it wasn't long before we saw him coming back home. Well, he said, I could have run and gotten on, but I just thought, well, let the train go. Let it go. And that was the day that Bob Kilgore was saved. My father was with him and instructed him some more in the things of the Lord. And he became a wonderful witness for the Lord and finally a preacher of the gospel. Well, as to myself, after I graduated from high school, I wanted very much to go to Bible school. And I didn't know anything about St. Paul Bible School at that time until somebody came from there and spoke in the little church, in the little meeting hall that we had, that where Bob Kilgore was the pastor. And there was a voice that said to me, you could go to that Bible school. And so it turned out that I went to St. Paul, came here to St. Paul. I had never been away from home and got on the train with Mr. and Mrs. Otto Schuster. And it was just like today going to a foreign country because I had never been this far. And I came to this school, and I never had a lonely day after I got here to be among young people, all in the Bible school that loved the Lord as I loved him. And I forgot to tell you that when I was only 8 years of age, I should have told you this long ago, and we were still living in Broadview, every time the preacher would give something in his message that would stir my heart, I was up at that altar. I was only 8 years old. No matter when it was, or what the occasion, if my heart was stirred, I was up at that altar and kneeling. And I remember my sister Selma said to my mother, I happened to be walking with him, why do you let Pelma go to the altar all the time? And my mother very wisely said, I don't think it hurts her. And that was when I felt in my heart that I was to be a missionary when I was 8 years old. And now I was in St. Paul, and you know what happens when young people that love the Lord. It wasn't long before the Lord had chosen the man for me to be my husband, and that's Carl Volstad, who stands here beside me, or he was beside me. And when we finished our work, he had been saved only 2 or 3 years when he came to Bible school. And we were sent off to Peru first as missionaries. And it would be too long to tell you the long stories about that.
But that can be another day.
Another day, yes. Mm-hmm. And our children have all been missionaries. Barbara is there as a missionary now, 25 years.